Alright boys, so my last two videos were topics of discussion that genuinely annoyed me but were things I felt were good to point out while also being able to state my opinion. I don't plan on constantly making videos like that, so don't expect me to kind of just constantly put stuff like that out. I don't like over magnifying negativity, and as someone who has made some questionable but more positive content, I figured I could make a video to spark a more positive discussion about Wuthering Waves and how the community aside, healthy competition between not only it, but Genshin Impact could make the open world gacha scene just that much more amazing for you all. I think something people fail to think about is there's a clear difference between constructive comparison and toxic teardown takes. Now, I know this is all just a matter of picking and choosing who you want to listen to, but I do genuinely feel like people's constructive comparisons between Wuthering Waves and Genshin Impact tends to get misconstrued by people who misunderstand their words, though sometimes these opinions can also be worded in a more so hostile way, which would warrant a negative reaction. This is just down to preference in tone and a failure to dictate tone through text. People in the gacha space tend to be very sensitive, parasocial, and overly protective of their favorite gacha games, which causes them to misunderstand or purposely ignore the explanations or reasonings behind a specific suggestion or opinion. They do this in order to save face for the games they have in their minds, in fear for the other person's opinion to warp their own perception of their favorite game, and thus potentially losing out on something that they would have originally loved. This way of thinking is fundamentally flawed, as it blocks you off from mental pathways of creative stimulation to think about ways to improve the already potentially perfect game in your mind, halting you from discussing what could make it truly ideal in an almost perfect objective sense. Evolution and innovation are not simply born from nothing. I'm hoping I can convince some people that these games competing would be quite good for the overall health of gameplay within the games themselves. People have to remember that competition in the gaming genre, through its annals and history, has created some of the most popular and well-known games in the world. Problems are the most important things to have in the world, as problems will bore solutions to make life, or whatever it is you're doing, simpler or exponentially easier. Comparing things that are of the same genre highlights negatives and positives in both games that theoretically the gaming community should use as an opportunity to band together and try to bring positive changes to fruition. Similar to the Helldivers incident that incited a movement to revert a change that could have potentially ruined the integrity of the game. Now obviously, the comparison and highlighted positive and negative aspects should not always be seen as one needs to change over the other in all cases. There are cases where the comparison between two games of the same genre may end in boring a new fruit that is a game that has both of the positives highlighted between the original comparisons and almost none of the negatives, or just something new entirely. Now, I am someone who thinks Genshin could indeed benefit from a better core combat system, but I also believe that we are at a point in Genshin's life where we shouldn't try to push for a change in the fundamental core gameplay aspect in opposition to quality of life changes, as Genshin does seem fairly set in its ways, and clearly advertises and presents itself in a way that is more so lenient on the aesthetic of the game rather than anything hardcore. I believe that the quality of life changes that could come to Genshin Impact would be enough to satisfy, dare I say, the majority of its current users. Now, people who dislike Genshin and original fans who have left its game in general are people who have a variety of complaints that all seems to be fixed in something like Wuthering Waves. Seeing this did cause a bit of bitterness amongst those people who want to switch from Genshin Impact to Wuthering Waves. A sense of unfairness almost, as it brought up questions like, why isn't this Genshin to begin with? And how is it that Genshin still isn't changing at all? To why won't the company listen like these guys? Along with a variety of interesting insults towards the game from its considerably overall strange community, with of course not all of them being psychos who threaten business officials from the company who developed their game. This isn't how you incite a change, by the way, guys. But the opposite reactions are also said in retaliation against Wuthering Waves, as people either claim it's too similar, in which case I think these people are just simply sick of the open world gacha genre in general. 2, it's too different from Genshin, as these people prefer the extremely slow, colorful vibe of Genshin Impact over a slightly more gritty, faster paced Wuthering Waves. There is also the third option, in which they heard their favorite streamers say that they don't like Wuthering Waves, so therefore they suddenly also don't like Wuthering Waves. Now, with that being said, clearly the games are focused on different avenues of entertainment, while existing within the same genre. However, with the arrival of Wuthering Waves in general, the developers of Genshin may find themselves in a position where they have hit a relatively deep financial detriment because of Wuthering Waves itself, which means change, or something big could potentially be brought over to the game. And even if nothing changes about Genshin Impact, both of the game's success has a potential to make another company develop a game similar to both, with most of the advantages both have, and almost none of the disadvantages. Both of these games at the end of the day, however, are very clearly targeted towards different kinds of individuals. But that doesn't mean we should vilify one to put the other over. This isn't the WWE, there is no heel turns or face turns here. But with that being said, I think for the people who want to purposely challenge themselves with the potentially even more difficult on release hologram boss fights to the extensive intro and outro skill combos that can spark your combative creativity, I do believe that someone could very easily, very simply, play both. I know this video is very surface level in comparison to my other videos, but I think it's still something that's worth talking about, as believe it or not, there are some people out there that just need to hear and understand that it's okay for someone to disagree with you, and it's okay for games to compete with one another. That's what the gaming industry is all about, competing and evolving. We wouldn't have gotten the Devil May Cry series if it wasn't for games like Silent Hill and Resident Evil competing in the horror genre. It helped to overall establish the horror genre, with Devil May Cry dominating the arena combat genre for a very long time. Imagine the kind of games competition between Genshin Impact and Wuthering Waves could create. Imagine what we could get to make everything so much better. I do genuinely think that both of these games will be doing perfectly fine. It's up to the community if they will allow their emotions to dictate how they're going to treat each other. But of course, from what I've seen, I feel as though we aren't going to see any love between the two communities anytime soon. But that's my take on all this. How do you feel about it? Do you agree with what I've had to say? Let me know in the comments. Anyways, I hope you all take care, and peace.